This is a video for the students in Year 12 at VJ International School in the Seychelles, and it's about creating a relational database. Now we are going to use a program called MAMP, and MAMP essentially simulates a web environment, an online environment where you would have a database in the background. So we're going to start MAMP, so I just opened MAMP and I clicked on the start button, and it opens up a web page, and you're going to go to the Tools section in the top left-hand corner, and you're going to go to phpMyAdmin. And phpMyAdmin provides an environment where you can build a MySQL database. So here, this is the environment, lots of different windows, and over on this side over here, left-hand side, you can see that there's different options here to create a database. So we're going to click on this one here, it says New. We click the New button, and this window changes, and we say, what are we going to call our database? Now, for the purpose of this example, I'm going to call it School DB, so School Database, right? That's what we're calling it. And I'm going to hit Create. And straight away it comes up, a little green message, and it said, yep, you've created a database. And if we have a look down here, there it is, School DB. So we've got our first database, and we want to create our first table. So in this table, we're going to start with students. So we're going to call this first table students, and we're going to start with 6 columns. So there'll be 6 different columns that go up and down the page that we can start entering information, and we can start collecting information about the students that go to the school. So I click Create, and this screen comes up here. Now this screen is really interesting because there's lots of information here. This is not entering the information about the students. This is creating the columns that go down. So we need to make sure that we create each column correctly with the right heading so that we're collecting the right information for the database. So to start with, we are going to start with a student ID. Now, I made very careful here to make sure there wasn't a gap. There's an underscore there, not a gap, because when you do a search on a database later, it doesn't like it when there's gaps. It doesn't work when there's gaps. So you make sure that there's no gaps, and I've used student ID. Now the student ID is going to be a number that keeps going up every time I add a student, so it's going to automatically increment. That's what this AI here is. This is not artificial intelligence, this is auto increment. Okay, now I do want it to automatically increment, and I want it to be the primary key. I want it to be the main thing that we use to search for students. We're going to use the student ID as the one unique item that the students do a search for. So we're going to call that the primary key, and we're going to tick on the auto increment. AI will auto increment, right? So that's the first one. And here, I've left it as int, which is an integer, okay, which means it's a number. It's going to auto increment as a number. In fact, I'm going to take that 22 off there. It doesn't need to be there, just student ID. Auto increment, primary key, perfect. The next thing I'm going to want for all the students is obviously you're going to want their name. In fact, I'm going to put first name. So first name. Now the first name, we want this to be characters that you can type into, and I'm going to put varchar, so variable characters. I'm going to put it in here, and the length of this spot, I'm going to make it 100 characters. Now, no one's name really goes up to 100 characters, but you might have someone with 2 or 3 first names, or a first name and a middle name. They want to put in both. So I'm going to give it 100 characters. It doesn't make a huge difference. Maybe if you're doing a big database, maybe the size would influence the size of the database. But for the purpose of this, I'm just going to leave it at 100. Now, I could also click in null over here, which would mean that if we were entering information into the database and we didn't put a student's name in, then that would be okay. You could have an empty section and nothing in that section. But for the purpose of this, I don't want to play around with too many of these other settings. I'm just going to leave it like this. So if we've got the first name, we need the family name, or the surname, right? So maybe I'll call it, no, I'll leave it as family name. I'm going to also make that varchar, and I'm also going to give that 100 characters to use in there. Now, I'm going to put the date of birth. Now, most people won't write date of birth like that. In fact, what they'll write is DOB, and that's kind of recognised as the date of birth. So I'm going to change this one from an integer, not to a variable character, to an actual date, so that people will enter the date when it comes to that one. And I don't need to put a length in because the date will have a fixed length. The next one I'm going to put in, let's put in gender. Now, gender is an interesting one. I'm going to put it in as varchar, and I am going to give it I'm going to give it only 6 characters. And the reason I'm giving it only 6 characters is you can either type in the word male or you can type in the word female. They're the only 2 things that can be typed in. In fact, we could do it as 1 character and then they put in just M or F, right? But for the purpose of this, I'll make it 6 characters and then it can be male or female. They'll both fit in there if you type the words in. For the next one, we could put in nationality. Because if we're at an international school, there'll be students from all various different nationalities, and let's give that 100 characters so there's plenty of space for you to type in whatever nationality those students might be. So this is going to be my first table. So it looks like I've finished that. It doesn't look too bad. It's called students, so I'm just going to hit save. And as I hit save, my table is created. And in this view, I can see it, that here's my table, these are the data types. All this other information has been filled in for me, and the auto increment is on my student ID. And you'll even see here that it has a little gold key. It's the primary key, which is what I want it to be, the primary key. On the left-hand side, you can see here's my table here, students. And if I actually go browse, it shows me the table laid out with the column headings at the top. And if I put some information in, it would start to fill up the columns, right? But I don't want to do that. I want to add another table down here. So at the moment, this single table all by itself is called a flat database. It has no relationships from one table to another, so it's just called a flat database. Now actually, we're creating a relational database, so I actually want to add a new table. Okay, so I'm going to go back to School DB. Down here in the section here, I can see create new table. So this table I'm going to call classes. And when I say classes, I mean as in what lessons the students go to. So I'm going to call this classes. I'm going to give it maybe 4 columns, that'll do. I'm going to hit create. Now I also want there to be a primary key on this section as well. I don't want there to be no way to define the different classes, or the classes need to have a primary key as well. So I'm going to call this class underscore ID. I'm going to leave it as an integer, same as we did before. I'm going to say it's a primary key, and I'm going to say, okay, auto increment. So that makes my first section. Now, in the classes, you want the name of the class. So let's call it, in fact, let's call it class name. And when I say class name, I mean, is it French, is it English, is it science, is it mathematics? That's what I mean. So I'm going to give it 100 characters because that's what we've been doing. Now, I'm also going to do the room. Which room is the class in, and I'm actually going to leave that as a varchar because some of our rooms are called the green room and the blue room. They're not just on numbers. So I'm going to leave it as varchar and I'll call it 100 characters. And let's put in the teacher. And the teacher we're going to put in as varchar as well, give them 100 characters. Now, later we're going to add to this database. We're actually going to make the teacher have its own table. So we would have 3 tables, students, teachers, and classes. And we'll have an extra set of relationships there. But to start with, we're just going to do 2. We're just going to do students and classes. So I've got teacher in down here, varchar 100, and I'm just going to hit save. And so now I have 2 tables. Okay, so, and both tables have a primary key on them. So if I have a look at this one, here's my classes. There's my primary key, which is my class ID. Then we have our class name, our room, and our teachers. And if I look at the browse to see the way that it's laid out, this is the way the columns are laid out. Now, at the moment, there's no relationship between these 2 tables. They're both individual flat tables that have no links. There's no relationship created between the 2. So I want to create a relationship. So I'm going to go to the students table to start with, and I'm going to click on structure. And I actually need to add a column in here. Now I want to add one more column, and the column I want to add is actually going to be the class ID coming over from here, linking me down to my students. However, it's a primary key in here, but because it's not originally part of this students table, when it comes over, it's like a visitor coming from one country to another. It's a foreign object coming over, and we actually call that a foreign key. So if I go to my students here, and again I'll go to the structure of the students, I'm going to add one column, and I'm going to add it after nationality right at the end. I'm just going to hit go, and it's going to say, alright, what sort of column do you want? Now I'm going to call this class underscore, and I'm actually going to put FK so that I know that's the foreign key. Okay, so that's why I've created a whole new column. I'm going to leave it as integer. I'm not going to put any keys or any of that sort of stuff into it. I'm just going to leave it as a foreign key. In fact, what I could do is I could go over to here and I could actually say index. I could actually do index if I wanted to do that. In fact, maybe I will do that. Just hit OK, leave it as index, and I'm just going to hit save right there. So now I've altered my table, and you'll see there's an extra one in here. It says class F key. It's got this little key here because I said that it was index, right? Now we actually want to do the relationship between the two. So I go to structure, and I click on this view right here that says relational view. So I'm going to click on that relational view there, and I'm going to say the column that says class FK, that's the column that I want to change. That's the column that I want to make a relationship with. And remember, I'm on the students table. I'm not on the classes table, I'm on the students table, and I'm choosing the class FK column. And I'm going to say, go to the classes table and get the class ID. So that's what I'm asking it to do. I'm saying, to make this link, to make this a foreign key, we're going to call it foreign key on our new table. Here, that's what we're going to call it, foreign key. We're on the school DB database. We're going to go to the classes table and we're going to get the class ID, and we're going to link that across. Now, there's two things here as well. One of them says on delete, restrict, on update, restrict. Now, on delete means if I was to go to the students database and I wanted to delete a student, but that student had information on the classes database, it's not going to let me delete the student. It's going to come up with a message saying, sorry, you can't delete the student because they've got information on another table. It's not going to let me do it. So I could go through and I could change some of those, right? I could make it no action so that I could potentially delete the student, and then the only problem with that is then I'd be leaving redundant data on the second table. So I'm going to leave it at restrict. Now on update, I am actually going to change one of these. I'm going to actually change this to say cascade. So what that means is if I make a change to the student database, not a delete, just a change, that information will be filtered down and go to all of the tables if it's needed on those other tables, right? So the information will cascade down through the other tables. So I'm leaving on delete to restricted, and on update, I'm changing that to cascade, and I'm going to hit save. And when I do that, you see my query has been executed successfully. Fantastic. You can see here is the constraint. Here's the bit of extra information that I've added to our database, which creates a link between the two. I've added that. And if I actually want to go back to my students table here, I'm just going to click on students and I'm going to look at the structure of it. And you'll see that it's all set up. Everything seems to be okay. It all looks good. Let's browse it. There it is, student ID, first name, last name, date of birth, gender, nationality, and it's got a foreign key as well, there as well, all right? Now, this is the end of this section. I could go to the school DB and I can look at it. I can see that there are two tables there within my database. I have my classes, I have my students, and we can start to input information. So the next part of our lesson is going to be inputting some information to see what the database looks like, and then after that, how we can use that, how we can start to make some queries and use that information, the data that we've put onto the database, right? That's it. Make sure you have it ready for tomorrow's lesson.